It was a bright and sunny Saturday afternoon. The kind of day that makes you want to run outside and play. 10-year-old Mia was super excited. She grabbed her big bucket of sidewalk chalk, bright colors like pink, blue, yellow, and green, and skipped out to the front of her house. She plopped down on the warm sidewalk and started drawing. First, she made a big, happy flower with petals that stretched out wide. Then she added a rainbow, curving it across the ground like a big, colorful smile. Mia loved drawing. It made her feel happy and free, like she could create anything she wanted. The neighborhood was quiet. Well, mostly quiet. A few birds chirped in the trees, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves. Mia's house sat on a little street with neat lawns and pretty flowers. Kids sometimes rode their bikes here, and old Mr. Jenkins across the street would wave from his porch. It felt like a normal day, the kind where nothing big happens. But oh boy, was that about to change. Mia didn't know it yet, but someone was watching her. Someone who didn't like her chalk drawings one bit. And that someone? She was about to turn Mia's fun day into something wild. Mia hummed a little song as she worked. She drew a butterfly next to the flower, giving it wings with swirls of purple and orange. The chalk felt smooth in her hand, and the colors popped against the gray sidewalk. She smiled to herself, thinking about how cool it looked. Maybe her mom would come out later and say, "Wow, Mia, that's so pretty." Maybe her little brother, Timmy, would try to add his own scribbles. Mia didn't mind. She liked sharing her fun with people. But not everyone felt that way. Nope, not everyone. See, there was this lady named Karen who lived a few houses down. Karen wasn't like Mia. She didn't think chalk drawings were fun or cute. To her, they were a problem. A big, messy problem. Karen was the kind of person who liked everything perfect. Her grass was always cut just right, her mailbox never had a speck of dirt, and she made sure everyone followed the neighborhood rules. She even had a little notebook where she wrote down things she didn't like when someone parked their car too close to her driveway. And now she was staring out her window, her eyes locked on Mia and that bucket of chalk. Mia didn't see Karen watching. She was too busy adding stars to her rainbow. She picked up the yellow chalk and made a big, shiny star right at the top. Then she grabbed the blue and drew a little cloud next to it. She giggled, thinking it looked like the sky was playing with her picture. The sun felt warm on her back, and her ponytail bounced as she moved from one spot to the next. She didn't have a care in the world. Why would she? It was just chalk. It would wash away with the next rain. No big deal, right? Well, not to Karen. Karen's house was super close, just 3 doors down from Mia's. From her window, she could see everything. And what she saw made her mad. Really mad. She didn't like the bright colors all over the sidewalk. She didn't like how Mia was sitting there, happy as can be, making what Karen called a mess. To Karen, the sidewalk wasn't for drawing. It was for walking. It was supposed to be clean and boring, not covered in flowers and rainbows. She tapped her foot, her arms crossed tight, and muttered to herself, "This is not okay. Not okay at all." Mia kept going, totally clueless. She drew a little bunny hopping under the rainbow. She gave it floppy ears and a fluffy tail, using the white chalk to make it stand out. She even added a carrot for the bunny to hold orange with a green top. "Perfect," she said out loud, clapping her hands. A couple of kids rode by on their scooters and waved at her. "Cool picture, Mia," one of them shouted. Mia waved back, her smile growing bigger. She loved when people liked her drawings. It made her feel proud, like she was sharing a little piece of happiness with the world. But while Mia was having fun, Karen was getting angrier by the second. She grabbed her phone off the table and held it up, glaring out the window. "That's it," she said to herself. "I've had enough of this nonsense." She didn't care that Mia was just a kid. She didn't care that it was a sunny day and everyone else was enjoying it. To Karen, rules were rules, and she was sure Mia was breaking one. She didn't even stop to think that maybe chalk wasn't a big deal. Nope. She had her mind made up, and she was ready to do something about it. Here's the thing, though, Mia wasn't just any kid. Sure, she looked like a regular 10-year-old with her sneakers and messy ponytail. Sure, she was just sitting there with her chalk, minding her own business. But Mia had a secret. A really cool secret that nobody in the neighborhood knew about. Not Karen, not the kids on scooters, not even old Mr. Jenkins waving from his porch. It was something special, something that was going to make this day way more exciting than anyone expected. What was it? Oh, you're going to find out soon, I promise. This story's about to get super good. Imagine this, Mia's out there, drawing away, while Karen's inside, steaming like a teapot about to whistle. Two totally different worlds, right? One's all about fun and colors, and the other's all about rules and frowns. They were about to crash into each other, and when they did, boom! Sparks were going to fly. Mia didn't know it yet, but her little chalk drawings were about to start a big adventure. And Karen? She had no idea what she was walking into. She thought she was in charge, but she was so wrong. So there was Mia, adding a big red heart to her picture. She stepped back to look at it, tilting her head. Awesome, she whispered. The sidewalk was now a giant piece of art, flowers, rainbows, bunnies, stars, all mixed together in a happy explosion of color. She dusted off her hands, leaving little clouds of chalk in the air. The day felt perfect. She had no clue that trouble was stomping her way. No clue that Karen was already dialing her phone, ready to call the cops over something as silly as chalk. But that secret Mia had? It was like a hidden treasure waiting to pop out. It was going to turn everything upside down and make everyone's eyes go wide. What was it? How could a kid with chalk have something so big up her sleeve? You're probably wondering, come on, tell me already. But hold on just a little longer. This is the fun part where you get to guess and imagine what's coming next. Trust me, it's worth sticking around for. Mia's day was about to go from quiet and sunny to loud and crazy, and you won't believe how it all plays out. Now, let's meet Karen. She wasn't just any neighbor. Oh no, she was the HOA queen of the block. HOA stands for Homeowners Association, which is like a group of grown ups who make rules for the neighborhood. Karen loved those rules more than anything. She was the kind of person who always peeked out her window, her sharp eyes looking for trouble. If a kid left a toy in the yard or someone's grass grew too long, Karen was on it like a hawk. She didn't mess around. And today? Today, she had her sights set on Mia and her colorful chalk drawings. Karen lived just a few houses down from Mia. Her place was perfect, super clean, with flowers in straight rows and not a speck of dirt anywhere. She liked it that way. To her, the neighborhood was supposed to look like a picture in a magazine, all neat and boring. But Mia's chalk? That was not neat or boring. It was bright and messy and fun, and Karen hated it. She stood at her window, her arms crossed tight, watching Mia draw those flowers and rainbows. Her nose wrinkled up like she smelled something bad. This is ridiculous, she muttered to herself. Kids can't just do whatever they want. Finally, Karen couldn't take it anymore. She threw open her front door and marched outside. Her slippers slapped the ground as she stomped toward Mia. She stopped right in front of the little girl and glared down at the sidewalk. To Karen, those chalk drawings weren't pretty, they were a crime scene. The flowers, the bunny, the rainbow, all of it made her mad. She pointed a finger at the ground and barked, "This is a violation." Her voice was loud and grumpy, like a teacher yelling at a kid who forgot their homework. "I'm calling the police." Mia looked up from her chalk, her eyes big and round. She didn't get it. "It's just chalk," she said quietly. Her voice was soft, like she was trying to figure out why Karen was so upset. To Mia, it was no big deal. Chalk was fun. It washed away with water. It wasn't like she broke something or made a real mess. But Karen didn't care about that. She shook her head so hard her glasses wobbled. "No excuses," she snapped. "This sidewalk belongs to everyone, and you're ruining it." Mia tilted her head, still confused. She didn't say anything else. She just watched as Karen pulled her phone out of her pocket. It was one of those big phones with a sparkly case. Karen held it up like a weapon and started tapping the screen. "I'm done with this nonsense," she said, loud enough for the whole street to hear. Then she pressed the phone to her ear and waited. Mia sat there, a piece of blue chalk still in her hand, listening as Karen talked. "Hello, 911? Yes, I need the police right now. There's a kid breaking the rules on my street." The neighbors started to notice. Down the block, Mrs. Carter peeked out her door, holding a cup of tea. Across the street, Old Mr. Jenkins stopped rocking on his porch and leaned forward to see what was going on. A couple of kids on bikes slowed down, whispering to each other. "What's Karen doing now?" one of them said. Everyone knew Karen. She was always complaining about something: too much noise, too many leaves, you name it. But calling the police over chalk? That was new, even for her. Karen kept talking on the phone, her voice getting louder. "Yes, it's an emergency. This child is defacing property. I want someone here right away." She waved her free hand around, pointing at Mia like she was the worst troublemaker ever. Mia didn't move. She didn't cry or run away. She just sat there, looking at Karen with those big, calm eyes. Too calm, maybe. Most kids would be scared if a grown-up called the cops on them. Most kids would at least look worried. But Mia? Nope. She wasn't scared at all. She was waiting. Waiting for what? Oh, that's the fun part, you'll see. Karen hung up the phone and crossed her arms again. She stared down at Mia with a mean little smile. "The police are coming," she said, like she just won a big prize. "You'll see. You can't just break the rules and get away with it." Mia blinked up at her. She didn't say a word. She just picked up her yellow chalk and started drawing a little sun next to her bunny. The sun had rays sticking out all over, bright and happy. Karen's smile disappeared. "Stop that," she yelled. "Didn't you hear me? The cops are on their way." Mia didn't stop. She kept drawing, slow and careful, like Karen wasn't even there. That made Karen even madder. She stamped her foot on the ground. "You're in big trouble, young lady," she shouted. "When the police get here, they'll take that chalk away and teach you a lesson." The neighbors kept watching. Mrs. Carter shook her head and went back inside. Mr. Jenkins chuckled to himself. The kids on bikes giggled and rode off. Everyone could see Karen was making a fuss, but Mia? She was cool as a cucumber. Inside, though, something was bubbling. Not in Mia, she was fine. But in Karen. She couldn't stand that Mia wasn't scared. She couldn't stand that this little girl with her bucket of chalk didn't care about her big, loud threats. Karen was used to people listening to her. She was the HOA queen, after all. When she said something, people were supposed to jump. But Mia wasn't jumping. Mia wasn't even blinking. And that drove Karen nuts. She paced back and forth, her slippers slapping louder with every step. "Just wait," she grumbled. "Just wait until they get here." Mia finished her sun and picked up the green chalk. She started drawing grass under the bunny, little lines that wiggled across the sidewalk. She hummed a tiny song, so quiet you could barely hear it. Karen stopped pacing and stared. "What are you so happy about?" she snapped. Mia didn't answer. She just kept humming and drawing, like it was still a perfect day. And maybe it was for her. Because Mia knew something Karen didn't. She wasn't afraid of the police. She wasn't worried about getting in trouble. Why not? Well, that's the secret she was holding onto, and it was a good one. The air felt thicker now, like something big was about to happen. Karen thought she was in control. She thought the cops would show up, grab Mia's chalk, and make everything right again. She thought she'd win, like she always did. But Mia's calm little smile said something else. It said, "I've got this." It said, "You don't know what's coming." The neighbors watched, the birds chirped, and the sun kept shining. Karen stood there, waiting for her big moment. And Mia? She kept drawing, waiting for hers. Who was going to be right? Stick around, because this is where it gets juicy. Time went by, slow and steady. The sun stayed high in the sky, shining down on Mia and her chalk drawings. Karen didn't stop talking, not even for a second. She was like a volcano, all hot and loud, spitting out words that bounced around the quiet street. "Kids these days have no respect," she yelled, her voice sharp like a teacher scolding a whole class. She pointed at the pink and blue swirls Mia had drawn, her finger shaking a little. "Look at this mess. It's awful. No one cares about rules anymore." Mia didn't say a peep. She didn't yell back or try to explain. She just sat there on the warm sidewalk, her legs crossed, holding a piece of yellow chalk. She leaned over and started drawing a tiny smiley face in the corner of her big picture. It had 2 dots for eyes and a curvy little mouth, happy and simple. Karen's shouting didn't bother her at all. She kept her head down, adding a few more lines to make the smiley face look even cheerier. It was like she was in her own little world, where Karen's big, mad voice couldn't reach her. Karen kept going, pacing back and forth. Her slippers made a loud slap 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 sound on the ground. "I told you, young lady, this isn't allowed," she said, her arms waving around. "You can't just scribble all over the place like this. It's rude. It's messy." She pointed at the rainbow, then the bunny, then the flowers, like each one made her madder than the last. The neighbors were still watching. Old Mr. Jenkins rocked in his chair, his eyebrows up high. Mrs. Carter peeked out her window again, shaking her head. Everyone could hear Karen, loud and clear. Mia finished her smiley face and picked up a green chalk. She started drawing little blades of grass under her bunny, wiggling the lines to make them look real. She didn't look up at Karen not once. She didn't frown or cry or get mad. She just kept going, calm as could be. It was weird, right? Most kids would be upset if a grown-up was yelling at them like that. Most kids would at least look nervous. But Mia? She was different. She wasn't scared. She wasn't even annoyed. She was waiting. Waiting for what? Oh, just hold on, you'll see. Then, something strange happened. A car rolled up the street. It was slow and quiet, no loud sirens, no bright flashing lights, nothing fancy. It was just a regular car, dark blue, with 2 people inside. It stopped right near Mia's house, and the doors opened. 2 grown UPS stepped out, both wearing dark jackets. Karen saw them and stopped pacing. Her eyes got big, and a sneaky little smirk spread across her face. She clapped her hands together and turned to Mia. "See," she crowed, her voice full of triumph. "The cops are here. I told you they'd come. Now you're in trouble." The neighbors leaned closer. Mr. Jenkins stopped rocking. Mrs. Carter's curtain twitched. The kids on bikes down the street turned around to watch. Everyone thought the same thing: Karen had won. She'd called the police, and now they were here to stop Mia and her chalk. Karen stood tall, her arms crossed again, looking like she was the boss of everything. "Go on," she said, waving at the 2 people. "Tell her she can't do this. Take that chalk away." But Mia didn't jump up. She didn't drop her chalk or run inside. She didn't even look surprised. She just kept sitting there, her green chalk still in her hand. Then, slowly, she turned her head and looked at the car. And guess what? She smiled. Not a big, silly grin, just a small, quiet smile, like she knew something special. Karen didn't notice the smile. She was too busy gloating. But that smile? It was a clue. A big, juicy clue that something was up. Why wasn't Mia worried? Why was she so calm when the cops showed up? The 2 people from the car started walking over. They didn't rush or look angry. They moved easy, like they weren't in a hurry at all. One was tall with short hair, and the other was a little shorter with a cap pulled low. They both had dark jackets, the kind that made them look important. Karen bounced on her toes, so excited she could hardly stand still. "Finally," she said. "Someone's going to fix this mess." She pointed at Mia again, her finger jabbing the air. "She's been breaking the rules all day. Do something about it." Mia set her chalk down and dusted off her hands. Little puffs of green powder floated into the air. She looked up at the 2 people walking toward her, and that little smile stayed on her face. Karen kept talking, her voice loud and bossy. "See all this junk on the sidewalk? It's not allowed. I checked the rules. She can't just draw whatever she wants." But the 2 people didn't answer Karen. They didn't even look at her, not yet. They kept their eyes on Mia, like she was the one they wanted to talk to. Karen didn't like that. She huffed and stepped closer. "Hey. I'm the one who called you," she said, her voice getting sharper. "This is my street too, you know." Still, the 2 people didn't say anything to her. They stopped a few steps away from Mia, standing side by side. The tall one tilted his head, looking at the chalk drawings. The shorter one put her hands in her pockets. They didn't seem mad. They didn't seem like they were here to yell or take anything away. It was weird. Really weird. Mia leaned back on her hands and looked up at them. Her ponytail swung a little as she moved. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were bright, like she was happy to see them. Karen didn't get it. She stomped her foot again. "What are you waiting for?" she shouted. "Arrest her or something. She's the problem here." But Mia just kept smiling, and the two people didn't move. The air felt funny now, like something big was about to happen. Something Karen didn't expect. Why wasn't Mia scared? Why was she so chill when Karen was freaking out? What did she know that Karen didn't? "Oh, you're going to love this, it's so good." Karen thought she had everything under control. She thought the police were her big win. But Mia? She had a trick up her sleeve, and it was about to come out. The neighbors watched, holding their breath. The street got quiet, except for Karen's huffing and puffing. Something was coming. Something awesome. And Mia? She was ready for it. Were you starting to guess? Hang on tight, because this is where it gets super exciting. The two people from the car walked closer, their shoes tapping softly on the street. Karen couldn't wait. She started waving her arms like she was trying to fly, pointing at Mia with big, wild swings. "Arrest her," she shouted, her voice loud and bossy. "She's defacing property. Look at this mess." To Karen, Mia was like a sneaky thief who'd ruined the whole neighborhood with her chalk. She bounced on her toes, so sure she'd won. She thought these cops were here to grab Mia and end her drawing once and for all. Mia just sat there, her hands resting on her knees. She didn't jump up or hide. She didn't even look scared. The tall person from the car wearing a dark jacket stopped right in front of her. Karen kept yelling, but then something crazy happened. The tall one bent down a little and looked at Mia with a soft smile. "Hey, kiddo, you okay?" he said, his voice nice and gentle. Karen stopped waving her arms. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Wait, what? What was going on? The tall one knelt down on one knee, right next to Mia's rainbow. He tilted his head and grinned. "Nice artwork, by the way," he said, pointing at the bunny and the flowers. Mia's eyes lit up, and she nodded. "Thanks," she said, her voice small but happy. Karen's face went all funny like she'd just bitten a sour lemon. She blinked fast, trying to figure out why this cop wasn't mad. Why wasn't he yelling at Mia? Why was he being nice? Then the tall one stood up and turned to Karen. He crossed his arms and looked at her with calm, steady eyes. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm Officer Daniels. This is my partner, Officer Lee." He nodded at the shorter person standing next to him, who tipped her cap a little. Karen's eyebrows shot up. Okay, so they were cops. Good. She puffed out her chest, ready to tell them all about Mia's crimes. But then Officer Daniels kept talking, and his next words changed everything. "And that little artist," he said, pointing at Mia. "She's my daughter." Boom. Yep, you heard that right, Mia's dad was a cop. A real, actual police officer. Karen's jaw dropped so fast it practically hit the sidewalk. Her eyes went wide, like big round saucers. She stood there, frozen, her arms hanging limp at her sides. She looked like someone had just pulled a rug out from under her feet. Mia's dad? A cop? No way. The neighbors gasped. Old Mr. Jenkins clapped a hand over his mouth, trying not to laugh. Mrs. Carter's curtain flew open all the way, she wasn't even pretending to hide now. Mia giggled softly and waved at Officer Daniels. "Hi, Daddy," she said, like it was no big deal. Officer Daniels waved back, his grin growing bigger. "Hi, sweetie," he said. Officer Lee, his partner, stepped closer and looked at the chalk drawings too. "Wow, Mia, you've been busy," she said, her voice friendly. She had a little laugh in her words, like she thought this whole thing was funny. And it was super funny. Karen thought she'd called the police to get Mia in trouble, but she'd actually called Mia's own dad. Karen's face turned red, bright red, like a tomato. She opened her mouth to say something, but all that came out was a little squeak. But, she stammered, pointing at Mia, then at Officer Daniels, then back at Mia. She couldn't make a full sentence. Her brain was spinning, trying to catch up. She'd been so sure the cops would be on her side. She'd been so sure they'd march over, grab Mia's chalk, and tell her to stop. But now she was standing there, looking silly in front of everyone. Officer Daniels turned to Karen again, his face still calm but a little serious now. "Ma'am," he said, "why'd you call us?" Karen blinked, like she wasn't sure what to say. She's breaking the rules," she finally blurted out, pointing at the sidewalk. "This chalk, it's not allowed. It's a violation." Officer Daniels raised an eyebrow and looked down at Mia's drawings. He scratched his head, then glanced at Officer Lee. "Does this look like a crime to you?" he asked her. Officer Lee shook her head. "Nope," she said. "Looks like fun to me." Karen's mouth flapped open and shut, like a fish out of water. But, the HOA, she said, her voice getting loud again. "We have rules. You can't just draw all over the place." Officer Daniels nodded, like he was listening, but then he smiled. "I live here too, you know," he said. "I've read the HOA rules. There's nothing in there about chalk." He shrugged. "It washes off with rain. No harm done." Karen's eyes got even wider. He lived here? He knew the rules? This was getting worse and worse for her. Mia picked up her pink chalk and started adding a heart to her picture, right next to the bunny. She wasn't scared at all, she was having fun. Officer Daniels watched her for a second, then turned back to Karen. "Mia's my kid," he said. "She's not hurting anyone. She's just being a kid." Officer Lee nodded. "Yeah," she said. "We were off duty today. Just came by to say hi. Didn't expect to get a 911 call about chalk." She chuckled, and Officer Daniels laughed too. The neighbors started laughing along, quiet at first, then louder. Karen didn't laugh. She looked around, her face getting redder by the second. Everyone was staring at her now: Mr. Jenkins, Mrs. Carter, the kids on bikes who'd rolled back to watch. They weren't mad at Mia anymore. They were looking at Karen like she'd made a big, silly mistake. And she had. She'd called the cops on a little girl who wasn't even in trouble. And not just any cops, her own dad. It was the biggest twist ever, and Karen didn't see it coming. Mia's secret was out, and it was awesome. She wasn't just a kid with chalk, she was Officer Daniels' daughter. That's why she'd been so calm. That's why she didn't run or cry when Karen called 911. She knew her dad would show up, and she knew he'd think her drawings were cool. Karen thought she was the queen of the block, but Mia had the real power all along. She had a dad who was a cop, and he was on her side. Karen took a step back, her slippers scuffing the ground. She didn't know what to do. Her big plan had fallen apart, and now she was the one who looked dumb. Officer Daniels gave Mia a little pat on the head. "Keep drawing, kiddo," he said. "You're doing great." Mia beamed up at him, her smile as bright as her rainbow. Karen just stood there, speechless, as the truth sank in. This was Mia's moment, and it was a big one. Karen stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a broken toy. Her face turned super red, redder than the bright red chalk Mia had used for her heart drawing. But the rules," she sputtered, her voice all shaky. She pointed at the sidewalk, then at Mia, then back at the sidewalk, like she couldn't believe what was happening. She was so sure she was right, so sure the cops would back her up. But now she looked lost. Officer Daniels, Mia's dad, crossed his arms over his chest. He looked at Karen with a calm, steady face. "The HOA doesn't ban chalk, ma'am," he said, his voice strong but not mean. "Maybe check the handbook next time before you call us on our day off." He didn't yell or get mad, he didn't need to. His words were enough. Karen blinked fast, like she'd just been splashed with cold water. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She'd called the police for nothing, and now she knew it. The neighbors couldn't hold it in anymore, they started laughing. Old Mr. Jenkins rocked back in his chair, chuckling so hard his hat almost fell off. Mrs. Carter giggled behind her window, her teacup shaking in her hand. The kids on bikes down the street hooted and clapped, like they were watching a funny show. Karen's big plan had flopped, and everyone could see it. She looked around, her face getting even redder if that was possible. Then she turned and slunk back to her house, her slippers dragging on the ground. "Ridiculous," she muttered under her breath, but no one cared what she said anymore. Mia didn't even look up. She grabbed her blue chalk and kept drawing, making her rainbow stretch all the way across the sidewalk. It was huge now, with every color red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple all shining bright in the sun. She didn't say a word about Karen or the cops or anything. She just kept going, her hands dusty with chalk. But if you looked close, you could see it a little grin on her face. Not a big, loud smile, just a quiet one. That grin said everything. She'd won, and she didn't even have to try hard. Then the best part happened. The other kids on the block ran over, their sneakers pounding the street. "Mia, that's so cool," shouted a boy with a red cap. "Can we draw too?" asked a girl with pigtails. Mia nodded, her grin getting a tiny bit bigger. "Sure," she said, pushing her bucket of chalk toward them. Soon, the sidewalk was full of kids drawing stars, cars, dogs, and goofy faces. They laughed and cheered Mia on, like she was the hero of the day. And she kind of was. Karen had tried to stop her, but now the whole block was one big, happy art party. Mia's dad, Officer Daniels, watched with Officer Lee. They stood by the car, smiling as the kids took over the sidewalk. "She's a good kid," Officer Lee said. Officer Daniels nodded. "Yep," he said. "And she's got more friends than Karen ever will." Mia didn't need to fight or yell. She just kept being herself, and that was enough. Karen was gone, back in her perfect house, but Mia? She was out here, winning the day with her chalk and her quiet little grin. And that's how a simple bucket of chalk turned into the biggest neighborhood showdown ever. Mia didn't need to yell or get mad. She didn't need to fight Karen with big words or loud shouts. Nope, she just stayed calm and let the truth come out. And guess what? The truth was enough to win the day. Karen thought she was the boss, but Mia showed everyone that you don't have to be loud or mean to be strong. Sometimes, the smallest person like a kid with a little chalk can shut down the biggest bully, and the bully doesn't even see it coming. Think about that for a second. Mia was just being herself, drawing her rainbows and bunnies, and she still came out on top. She didn't let Karen scare her or ruin her fun. She stayed cool, even when things got crazy. That's pretty awesome, right? So here's a question for you: could you stay that cool if someone was being mean to you? Could you keep doing what you love, even if a bully tried to stop you? I bet you could. Tell me what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your ideas. Oh, and if this story made you smile or laugh, give it a big thumbs up. Mia's little victory was fun to watch, and there's more cool stuff like this coming your way. Stick around, okay? You never know what might happen next. Maybe another kid with chalk will surprise us all. See you soon, and keep being awesome, just like Mia.